Hi everyone, and welcome to this month's podcast where I'm joined by Reena Shah. I'm honored to have her here. She's a senior legal advisor, compliance lead, and market data protection officer for Nestlé. And I don't know what to say about her achievements so far, but we'll find out together. Welcome, Reena.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the podcast, and thank you for being one of the few women that we've had on the podcast so far. And I really want more women to be demonstrating how you can excel, in our legal careers. So thank you. And also because this is South Africa Women's Month, this is perfect for us.
Yeah.
And I know that you've lived in South Africa as well, so this is an apt conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And actually, I am doing a campaign around South Africa's Women's Day and celebrating what's coming up in September is South Africa's Heritage Day.
Yeah.
So I'm actually running a campaign at the moment for our whole region to try and create that love of heritage, but also talk about how women those important matriarchs in our family take a huge part of that journey that we all take in passing heritage down.
Amazing. And we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Perfect.
But let me start off with this. If I had talked to you 10 years ago and said to you, what do you think you'd be doing then? What would you say that you'd be doing now?
Wow. This is definitely a loaded question because I think about 10 years ago, I had envisioned the traditional model of I'll be in private practice, and maybe by this time I'll have my own small, medium-sized firm, and that was actually where the vision went. I never envisioned I would have worked across sub-Saharan Africa and traveled across so many countries and for work. It's 26 countries I've so far worked across. And
amazing.
Yeah, so I really never envisioned that.
But so you knew you wanted to be a lawyer. So how did that come about? How did you, because for me it was, from a very young age, knowing that I wanted to be like a judge or something like that. What was it for you?
Oh, wow. Okay. So I didn't have any judicial dreams. As a young child, I actually always saw myself as somewhat of an activist for the environment. I envisioned I would be an environmental lawyer or something of the like. The plans changed a little bit along the way, but I think in terms of living by my values and principles, that hasn't changed too much.
Yeah.
I'm so fortunate enough to work for an organization that has similar values, and we're aligned in terms of not just doing what is legal, but also doing what is right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So how did you start your career in law? How did you do it? How did you excel to these senior legal rankings and rights and everything?
So if I was good, I actually graduated in what was then the recession in the UK, and I was one of the unfortunate people who was not able to get a training contract in the UK.
Yeah.
And part of the reason about being honest about this is because maybe for me that was actually the best sort of, at the time, failing that happened.
Correct. But it is very difficult. Anyone who has tried to get a training contract in the UK knows how difficult it is. It is not. It's like a lottery that you win by chance. So it's not a failure of any sort. But in any case, that was.
But when
your
you're
path.
that young, you think that.
Of course.
And then obviously being the recession, you try and console yourself and say, no, so many of us, we weren't able to get training contracts because of the recession.
Of course.
So I made at the time the decision of moving back to Kenya, and I think it was the best decision that I've ever taken. I moved back and I started my journey in private practice with Rahman Zanji Elms and Verdi Advocates.
Amazing. A firm that has been around for ages.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. And it's got some really amazing partners who really taught me and encouraged me just to be confident about myself and my abilities. So I started off with them. I spent 3 years with them before I went the corporate route. Yeah.
And so who did you join another firm in Kenya or?
No, I actually went and joined Eat Out after.
Okay, so Eat Out is like a magazine for
So they're
promoting food, digital marketing.
Digital marketing in the HoReCa industry. So it is to promote restaurants, food establishments, hotels, etc.
Yeah.
That opportunity was really, really cool. I don't think they necessarily needed as much legal support.
Yeah.
So I was really lucky that the CEO or head of Eat Out, I don't know what the reference, but Mikul was actually very cool, and he encouraged me to try out various things like designing my own website. I don't think anyone would just say, hey, well, you're a lawyer, but you want to test this out, you want to try it out, see what happens. So,
okay. And was that then a natural progression to Nestlé, or how did that happen?
So knowing that there wasn't as much of a challenge for me in the legal field, I decided to start consulting. So I started consulting, and it is actually while I was consulting, and as you do, it's just kismet, I guess. You come across a opportunity, and on that, the knock on the door was actually Nestlé. They were looking for some additional support.
Amazing.
And it was initially intended to be like a short 6-month consulting opportunity, just providing them with a little bit of support in the local market and maybe extending out to a couple of other countries. And then look at me now, 9 years down the road. Wow. In fact, this month, 9 years. Wow. If I'm right, it's today. Exactly 9 years since I joined Nestlé.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And so the decision to go in-house versus legal practice, what do you think is so different, and why do you enjoy in-house practice more than you would have the corporate practice that I'm in?
So I think when you work in-house, you have one client. That's not to say that one client means less work. That means that you really begin a journey with that client. It's a long-term relationship, understanding how they think. It's how do they tick? What is their value system? And once you begin to understand that, you can actually go beyond what in private practice is just advising on what the law says and how to support your client. Here, you actually get to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
You get to drive the strategy. You get to see firsthand how your advice is used. Not just send an email with, like an opinion or advice. It's actually having the opportunity to see your cake rise.
Yeah. Well, amazing. I mean, that is a perfect analogy for Nestle because it has so many brands in the consumer goods space. What attracts me to being in practice is actually the ability to work for a Nestle, for a Meta, for the different clients that you have in the variety of work. But for you, it must be variety every day because Nestle is such a huge company anyway.
Yes.
And so what are the most challenging things about being the senior legal advisor and also the compliance and market data protection officer? It's all encompassing, isn't it?
It is extremely all encompassing. It's, so in terms of my role, at the moment I cover 23 countries. And
23 countries. I mean,
yeah.
How?
So it does sound daunting. It is 23 countries, and you are looking at different jurisdictions, different legal systems. But after so many years of working across so many jurisdictions, one of the things that I have learned is the law is the law's there to protect a right. Now, who and what that right is really what we have to understand. The moment you start understanding that, then straight off the bat, all the similarities start to come off the table. Okay. And I mean, if I was just to explain why I actually genuinely enjoy my role, is because, especially as a compliance officer, you can put together a comparative table, and right off the bat, you can see all these similarities, and the only differences are minor differences, like what are the timelines for filing documents or etc. I mean, it's those differences are very few, every single regulation, whether we're talking about data protection in Kenya, or we're talking about data protection in Mauritius, or the Poppy Act in South Africa, the premise is the same. The right that is being protected is the same. Just how you exercise it.
It's amazing that you're talking about comparative tables, because actually one of the things, because I focus on Africa as well, and one of the things that we've been doing is doing exactly that, doing guides that cover the whole of the globe, so that clients are able to know very quickly what are the pain points in each of the countries that we're covering.
And those are so helpful.
And that is, and really I think that it's interesting for me, because I get to see, and also you get an opportunity to raise the standard when you're working in other countries where, for example, an employment right is not really being protected, and you can then say, well, let's use best practice from somewhere else.
I am so happy that you actually talk about that, because that's actually the Nestlé way, is to adopt the highest standard. And so I would allude to that being one of my my strengths in terms of how to successfully be a senior legal advisor, or a compliance officer, a data protection officer, whatever title you want to say. But the best way is to actually apply the highest standard. And that means, carrying out those comparative tables and disseminating that information in a simple way that the business, as an in-house counsel, because that's your client, the business can actually translate those technical, or rather you translate those technical complex issues into simple ways that they can apply them. And that's where the success lies. It's how do you translate all this jargon into something very simple?
I mean, it must be interesting and change from day to day. So tell us, what is your day to day like? And the second part of the question is, in terms of the legal skills that you need, is it corporate skills? Is it IP skills? Because Nestle has a very big brand. Is it data protection, as you already are the data compliance officer anyway? So what is the day to day like, and what part of the legal mind do you need to apply? Don't tell me all of it at the same time.
No. So if we can go back to the first question. So just for my purposes, because there was a whole load on the second question, if you can just repeat the first question again.
So what is the day-to-day like?
Okay. So in terms of my day-to-day, I have to actually be honest. If you're working across so many countries as the same as you can't really compare one day to the next. There's, you could be carrying out, or rather, I know, I mean, in my case, one day I'm carrying out trainings. The next day I could be actually focusing on reporting and analysis. I mean, it's still within the legal field. You know that there's obviously reporting that you have to do there. I could be managing external litigation lawyers, and I could. There's a variety of work and contracts. I know the common thinking that most people have is that as a lawyer, that's what you do. You draft contracts.
Review contracts.
Review contracts and draft contracts. But there's so much additional value that we bring to the table, whether it's to a special project. In a region like this, there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on. But then there's the new focus areas, which those are really exciting, where we as lawyers within Nestlé, we're beginning to focus on sustainability and advocacy and data protection and food laws. I mean, food is the new tobacco. That's what we say in Nestlé. And so there's a lot of focus in these areas, and so one day to the next, it definitely varies.
Tell me about food law. That's very interesting. What does that mean?
So food law, now, if we're talking about the 80s, tobacco was really the regulation, you mean? Yes. So when I'm talking about food laws as in the regulation. We're talking about the sugar content, the trans fat content, salt content. But we're also, Nestlé is not just taking a stance where you're looking at reducing just for compliance sake. We are also looking at how do we fortify our nutrition. Because you have to meet the nutritional needs of the country that you're in. For example, in Angola, I'm just recalling some of this, and there was a serious issue of malnutrition because some of the children they were not able to get regular meals. So Nestle did something amazing several years ago where they started to provide at least one meal, and they were working with the Ministry of Education to provide one healthy meal, which was also fortified with additional ingredients for children.
Yeah.
So that they know that at least the children have that one meal when they come to school.
And there is a minimum, like the standard of like nutrition that you need.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's what we mean by food law. So it's not just taking a negative stance to it, or I call it a negative stance, but I mean in terms of reducing the faux pas ingredients. It's actually now taking a positive stance where we are trying to do better for our consumers. We're trying to provide them with what they technically need.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that is very interesting because the is Africa behind in that kind of regulation on trans fats and sugar content and all of that? Because there's been a big push in in Europe and the UK for those kind of things. Are we behind on that? No.
No, we're catching up very quickly. I wouldn't say we're necessarily behind. Yes, there are some countries which are still discussing some of these regulations. I'm not an expert in this area, but I can tell you that that Kenya is already looking at a traffic light system.
Okay.
And I mean, just our own like backyard, we are already discussing how these different elements or ingredients in foods are impacting us.
Okay.
You can see the same thing in Mauritius. You can see in various countries. These discussions are happening.
Amazing.
Part of it is also revenue driven, where countries are also trying, governments and are trying to gain revenue, but also there is the additional side where we are trying to do, as governments, as legislators, we are trying to do our part, and that makes me proud to know that our legislators have our back.
Well, I mean, that's great. And in terms of sustainability, I guess you're also talking about packaging, emissions from the factories and etc. I mean, your role is so varied. I was even honing in on the data protection, but that's actually just a fraction of it.
Well, I mean, it's amazing as a in-house counsel in Nestlé, you touch so many different areas. We have our own individual specializations, but we also are general counsel. You sort of have to plug and play.
Yeah.
And it's nice, and that's why I say that you can't really compare one day to the next.
Of course. That would be now it looks extremely silly. What skills do you think that you bring to this role? What skills, if someone was to say, I want to be a general counsel at Nestlé, what is a particular skill that you bring, that your unique selling point?
So I actually I joke and I say that I'm a permanent student, but I think that really is, being humble enough to learn and hungry enough to learn is something that any general counsel should be, but you also need to be self-driven. I mean, if we're talking about your role as an individual, and if you want to succeed, you need to be able to drive your career. That means don't leave it to someone else to tell you where to go, what to do. And that's not just for a lawyer. I think that's for every young person.
I mean, I agree. Yeah.
It's advice for anyone. Be self-driven, but humble enough to learn. The journey to excellence is always going to be continuous.
I agree completely. So humble, hungry, and driven. I like those 3 words. So let's talk. Last month we had my partner Shem talking about data protection, and I know that you're a data protection officer.
Yeah.
Now that we get to hear from you as the actual person in the firm, what is that responsibility like? What does it mean to be the data protection officer in a company such as Nestlé?
So I personally, I don't want to go into all of the nitty-gritty in answering this question. Though the one thing that I want to emphasize is that data protection is not a checklist. And that's also the same thing I try and talk about when I talk about compliance. It's not a checklist. It is a continuous effort. Data protection officers play a strategic role. You need to, as an organization, you need to understand the value that they bring, especially because we're in a data-driven society. In as much as we may like to think that those of us in Africa, we're not in the same environment, but we are very much there. The mobile penetration across Africa is possibly higher than elsewhere. I mean, most of us have not just got one SIM, we have two, or we have three phones even, you know.
Which perform different functions.
Exactly. And so, you know, we've got to understand that a data protection officer has a strategic role, and that strategic role is in helping you advance your business. And it's important to understand that they need to be at the high table. They need to be able to understand the strategy of the organization to help the organization meet that strategic goal. And that's what I would like to emphasize. Don't think of it as a checklist where, okay, I get my employee consent or I get my consent notice signed by my data subject. No, think about it as I think actually I would probably say we need to start now thinking about it in terms of the ethical use of data. And thinking, how do we use the data or process the data in a way that it is moral, not just legal. And that's the direction I would encourage any organization to go to. And that's the role, obviously, a data protection officer would play if they're sitting at the high table. Yeah,
that's a very high standard that you because morality, I guess, is for anyone to presuppose what they think. It's subjective, But I think I understand what you're saying in terms of the responsibility that one holds in that position. Just from a technical point of view, how did you become a data? Did you do training? Is there a course just for anyone who wants to do that?
So in terms of a technical point, I actually completed my Certified Information Privacy Manager course with the IAPP. So the IAPP is the International Association for Privacy Professionals.
Okay.
They have several courses. They also have a privacy professional course. So it's the CIPP. You can do the European version. I think they have a US version, a Canadian version as well, and a Asian version. But they also have, for those people who are in the IT industry, they actually have also got an opportunity for you to certify yourself, because there is a huge, digital, technical, I don't know what, information technology side to data privacy and data protection. So it doesn't mean that this is just for lawyers, and it doesn't also mean that you have to be a lawyer or an IT person to get into it. I think if you're looking for a change, or if you're just looking to enhance an area that you're interested in, I think it's worth looking into.
And those bodies that you referred to, are those like oversight bodies for globally that are recognized globally, and they're the ones?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right. So if anyone is interested, those are the ones to look for. But thank you, Reena, for that. I think that's very important for anyone who wants to. Okay. So now let's turn to the future. Yeah. You are at Nestlé. What are the challenges that you think a consumer goods company like Nestlé, I think we've touched on it a little bit, will be facing in the future, and how are you guys preparing yourself for that?
So I think with any consumer goods organization like Nestlé, the future is going to be daunting. We are looking at a world where third-party cookies are being are no longer sort of the go-to. I mean, we're looking at a cookieless world, and that means that organizations need to start being a lot more innovative with their marketing. We've got, obviously, in addition to that, there's an increase in data privacy regulations or data protection regulations across every jurisdiction. Discussions are a lot more focused on the right to privacy, and that is going to lead to a lot of cost implications for any organization, whether we're talking about a Nestlé or a Mondelez or any organization, is big or small. I mean, we could be just talking about any normal small organization in Kenya. If they are marketing and they want to continue marketing to their consumers, but personalize that communication,
Yeah.
they are going to have to change. They're going to have to become a lot more innovative. And what's amazing is I think Kenya has done some amazing things in that regard. COVID, it showed us how, how fine, we're not talking about necessarily marketing, but we're talking about the digital area. We're doing so many amazing things with USSD platforms.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just think there's a lot of brains out there in Kenya, and it's time that we start having these discussions and seeing what young people are also capable of.
Where the innovation is.
Yeah.
To enable direct marketing to customers and for them to be repeat business. And
exactly.
So I guess it's all about retaining that bottom line while, in the midst of regulation, I guess.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for everything that you've told us here today, and thank you for sharing. I think it's been very important. One of the things that I really want to get out of this discussion, I had a chat with my mentees, and they were saying that they really want to get tips and tricks for working well. As a younger generation, I think some people don't know, like, what are the tips to really working efficiently? What would you say if you were to give one or two tips and tricks?
So I am going to share something that my own mentor, who I owe a lot to in terms of...
Do you want to give a shout out?
No, I think I don't know if he'll be happy for me to give a shout out, but I think he's a little bit more of a private person, but I really do. I think he knows who he is,
okay.
and
I guess he'll be watching. So hi.
Yes, hi. So I owe a lot to my professional growth to him, and one of the things that he ingrained in my career or my mind early on was the need to narrow down to the issue.
Okay.
So you need to have a methodology: facts, issue, law, views. That you have to do.
Facts, issue, laws, application. Which is what
facts, issue, law, application. Okay, or views.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a sense, essentially, it is the same thing: facts, issues, law, and then application or views, whichever. I guess that last bit changes depending on what the ask is. But I think that methodology, we apply it in law school, and then we leave, and it's somehow forgotten. But that was something which he was very, very insistent that if you do not apply this methodology, you are not ever going to succeed. You need to keep applying the methodology. And in that respect, the issue is one of probably the most difficult things, because we will always narrow into the surface issue. And that's very easy for us to kind of think that we're successful at when we're early on in our career. And then that means you're really not giving the right advice. You're not necessarily dwelling in on the real risks.
What is it that the client wants?
Exactly.
Whether it's an in-house client or a private client.
Yeah. I mean, no matter the type of client, no matter how big or small, understanding the issue and really spending that time to understand the issue, that would be one of my biggest tips, is just take the time with the issue. Don't be rushing to give the advice or to give your views, because trust me, if you spend the time on the issue, the rest will come
quite easily.
Very easily.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of where you've actually applied that?
Oh gosh, no. I don't think I could give it. I mean, it's every day. It's very difficult for me to just come up with an example
on the spot.
No, on the spot. I apologize. That one I don't. I mean, I would really need time to come up with an answer.
But it's an everyday application, I guess.
It is an everyday application, which is why no example is going to be ever good enough to say here on this platform. I think every single day, no matter how big or small, that methodology is probably going to be the Bible for any lawyer to succeed.
Well, as we leave on that note, humble, hungry, and driven. Thank you so much, Reena, for spending time with us and for giving us an insight as to how you've climbed up the career ladder, which is phenomenal, what you're doing in your daily work, which is amazing, and how you're managing to stay afloat, which is even better. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that, Njeri.
No worries, no worries.
And I hope that my sitting here will encourage women. I mean, we really need to hear back from our fellow women.
We do. Actually, on that note, we haven't spoken about the Heritage Day. So tell us a bit about that.
So one of the additional roles I play is I am a member of our diversity and inclusion team, and I'm actually a regional champion.
Yeah.
So there is a campaign we're running internally. We're trying to encourage all of our fellow colleagues to give a shout out to that grandmother or mother or sister or aunt who raised them.
Yeah.
But to do it through food, because you know what, Nestlé is all about food.
Food, yeah, of course.
And so I've just been getting colleagues to cook, to get into their kitchen and just show us what their favorite
you
recipe
cook,
is.
Reena, don't you?
I do.
You
I
do.
love to cook.
Yes, and so do I, as you know.
I do know, and I can't wait to actually try out some of your recipes.
Yes, and we'll do it together actually.
Perfect.
So it'll be good. It'll be exciting for me as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so excellent. And can we see that campaign running, or is it just an internal thing?
It's an internal campaign, but we're hoping that out of the internal campaign we can get a couple of really amazing favorite recipes from across the region where people are either using a Nestlé product or innovating a existing recipe and making it exciting for all of us. I mean,
that would be great to see a published recipe from someone that's actually in Nestlé. That would be amazing.
I have a colleague who just won this week's competition, and it's an amazing cake. So what I might do is I will ask her if I can share her grandmother's recipe.
Oh, that would be so
and you can
so
make it
good.
one day.
And also we could post it here for everyone as well.
Exactly.
So everyone watching, that would be really good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Reena.
No
I appreciate
problem.
your time. I appreciate you being here, and it's been really lovely talking to you.
Thank you, Njeri.
Everyone, see you next month.